Ahead and call to order the meeting of the Ordinance and Resolution Committee. Please note that Councilman Bundy and Braun and myself are the members of the committee, but we have many other members here from the council and also representing the city here. So this is being live streamed as a public meeting. So if you have a comment that you would like to make sure that you turn on your microphone and state who you are, and then go ahead and proceed and make your comment. So we are here to look over ordinance number 2025-5, which has to do with public purchasing within the city of Auburn. This ordinance was tabled and forwarded to committee at the last council meeting. Most of you should have received an email today from the city attorney with proposed changes to that ordinance. And I don't know who would like to talk on that. Zach, if you would like to talk on that, or if we can just proceed going. You want me to go ahead and go through this, or do you want to talk about the changes that were made? I know that was forwarded from the committee, or to the committee, from Councilman Webb, who said he had about 10 changes that he wanted to make to it. So I don't know if this addresses everything that he was concerned about.
Well, I don't think I was on that email, so I don't know what the.
Oh, you just sent out. No, there was no email sent. There was just the email with the proposed changes to ordinance 2025 that we received this afternoon.
Well, I was just saying I'm not sure all of what Councilman Webb's.
Oh, I got you.
So
I did. Okay.
What? From what was filed 2 weeks ago, the changes we changed, added that all purchases for supplies by the city of Auburn with an estimated cost of less than $10,000 may be purchased on the open market without inviting or receiving quotes. This was to keep our departments from having to, if they want to buy a box of screws or something, to not be required to go get 3 quotes for that. We added this next paragraph that for those purchases between $0 and $10,000, not including supplies, the departments need to obtain at least 2 quotes. And if they can't obtain 2 quotes, then they can look at the special purchasing procedures and identify why they needed to use the special purchasing procedures. And then the very first part of that next paragraph, originally that what was filed was all purchases between 0 and 50,000. So since we took care of 0 to 10,000, now it's 10,000 to 50,000. Trying to think what else the only other things in here we had various, as amended from time to time, as from time to time amended, different variations of that phrase. So I just changed it so that it all says as amended from time to time anywhere that we talk about referring to a statute and potential amendments. Otherwise, it's the same as what was filed for the first reading. I don't know what else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the update on the changes. I guess I'll turn this over if Councilman Webb would want to go through what his concerns were and what his additions or changes would have proposed to Ben, because this is here because he wanted to send this here. So.
Sure, I'd be glad to highlight what I was thinking about. Of course, I am a contractor and I do civil projects, and I bid civil projects with the city. So my concern is the civil project, not so much overall purchasing of like extension cords and nuts and bolts and things like that. So I'm just looking at the processes that, because civil projects are not manufactured like a police car or fire truck or whatever, itemized things you would buy through a vendor. So in my opinion, and from my experience, that the civil projects should be some kind of oversight by engineering. I've been given projects by department heads that have really no idea what they're designing on concrete or whatever the situation is, and if all the civil engineering department knows about the civil engineering projects. So I would like to see maybe a separation somewhere that would specify out civil projects compared to just, public purchases projects. And I think the wording on including the deadlines is good. We've talked about that. That's definitely something that needs to be done. I've been doing this for a long time, and you wait 2 months because they're chasing down contractors to try to get bids. So if you have a deadline and you just ask 2 or 3 contractors or, whatever, preferably more than 2, 3 or 4 contractors, and if you get 1 or 2 bids, at least you've solicited other contractors. Kind of helps cut down on any kind of potential talk amongst contractors and the people getting the bids and stuff. So the dollar value from like 10,000 to 50,000 would, I think, is kind of, it was open before. There was only like maybe needed 1 bidder in that before, or 2 bidders maybe, which is really not enough to solicit for that for civil projects. So, the main crux is civil projects should go through engineering, even if they have to hire an engineer for something up there in the $40,000, $50,000 range or whatever, so that they know what the project spec, and you're getting at least asking 3 quotes for the $10,000 to $50,000 range, and you have a deadline of when the bid is submitted and when the bid is due. I've worked a lot with the street department and the water department on the timeline, and that's worked out really well. They get stuff in within about a week or 10 days. What the bid tab is. You got the job or not got the job, and you move on down the road. So that's it in a nutshell. It's hard for me to put things in a nutshell, but that's where I'm at.
So to try to restate that, then everything here is good in terms of the timeline, with at least 7 days before the time fixed for receiving quotes. Everything there is good. The only thing separate you would want is something saying about the civil jobs.
Yes,
go to the
my goal
engineering.
would be to look at civil.
So that's the one thing you need to have added in there. And most of those jobs that would be civil jobs would be more than probably the $50,000 range, right? Some could be smaller, but
I bid stuff that's $2,000.
Okay.
And that's, not that critical of the job, but when you get up that $10,000 range to 50,000, then it's a lot more money, and lack of design or lack of you only need two bidders, so this should be more than 2 bidders.
Okay.
And Zach has done a lot of this. When I said 10 items, he's done a lot of stuff to fix this, to what I've been saying over the last couple of months. I've talked to the mayor stuff about this, and so we've made a lot of progress. We just need to fine tune it into the civil project area.
Anything else from any committee members or anything?
I mean, I just had a couple of minor things, but I kind of want to, just to clarify what Councilman Webb's going here, is that it's just that $10,000 to $50,000 range you're thinking engineering needs to be involved?
Well, anything over 50, it usually has engineering already involved. And I've talked with engineering; they're happy to do that because that's their forte. So,
right.
They're happy to do that. And I did have a problem with the personage agents and stuff like that, but this information I got today helped clarify that. So I'm happy with where that's going on chapter 30.
So, Kevin, what you're saying is anything over $10,000 needs to go to
Say it again.
anything over the $10,000 needs to go to the engineering?
It should, yes. Engineering, they could, you could still use a department head purchasing through that for the, give them the timeline, but engineering should approve the specs on, like, if you're going to do run a curb for water or something, and the engineering would look at that and say, yes, okay, this is a good spec. Go ahead and put it out for bid. Or we need
So
to
it really doesn't
redesign
matter if it's $50,000. What you're saying basically is anything over 10 needs to go through them.
for civil projects.
Okay. So anything over
I think pretty
$10,000.
automatic over 50,000 engineering has sees that from what I don't bid a lot of stuff over 50,000 because of the size of the contractor I am, but I think that's all pretty much designed
So
by
do
some
we,
kind of engineer.
I guess, Zach, do we need to reword that to where if we decide that's where we want to go, that anything over 10,000 needs to go to any 10,000 or above on a civil project?
I'd like to ask the administration if there's any issues with that in terms of smaller projects that don't technically need engineering that could be hung up by that, because engineering has a lot of work going on. And I don't know that we want to bog them down, but I'd like the administration's input as well.
Yeah, so historically, matter of fact, last fire department project is a good one that engineering was involved. That project came in at 109. Under that 50,000 mark, like 10 to 50, I think a lot of times department heads will rely on the contractor to provide that information because it is a smaller job. You get into the summer months, could hinder the workload of the engineers. I've not spoken with the engineers in reference to this, so this is the first time I've heard of that, but I'm happy to speak with them and see what their thoughts are. But I would say a lot of times we rely on the contractor to provide that information and kind of the scope of the job once they meet with the department. So
I'd like to follow up on that a little bit. I have talked to engineering and they're fine with the, either just looking at it, saying, yeah, this is good, or designing it. And when you're talking the difference between a contractor and engineer, there's a big difference. I'm a contractor. I can engineer things, but I'm not an engineer. The only reason I can engineer things is I've been doing it for 45 years. So a lot of experience, and not every contractor that you're going to solicit for some of these bids are going to have the knowledge or experience to be able to do that. So that, in my opinion, engineering should at least look at the design before it goes out for bid, even if they don't need to spend a lot of time redesign it, and that's your safety valve. Because really, the contractor is supposed to do what the engineers or architects design. When you get into commercial buildings, that's strictly every commercial building is an architect, civil engineer blueprint, and that's what the contractor follows. And the inspector looks at that and says, you did it according to the civil engineer and according to the architect, and it's okay. So
Is it, if I can ask, is it lack of clear instruction? I'm wondering if it's, do we have to involve engineering, or do we just have to tell the department heads that if you're letting out a project, you need to be more specific about what you're looking for?
well, it's contracting is like the wild, wild west.
Right.
So you can get anything and everything. You get different levels of contractors. You get different department heads that
Right.
not sure what they're designing, and so you have licensed engineers in a whole department that can look this stuff over, even if it's a quick. If you want to say, hey, go ahead, department head, put this project together, run it by engineering, make sure it's kosher, and let it out for bid.
So
I guess my thought is, are we going to overload engineering with civil projects? I don't know what their workload, so to speak, is. I mean, if we start throwing everything at them, are they going to be able to keep up?
But I think, though, to follow up with where I feel like this is headed, is we're not necessarily actually asking engineering to design the project or lay out the project. We're asking engineering to review the project that
Correct.
the department head has laid out, which
I didn't know if that would
Yeah.
be too much for the engineering department. with everything else going on they have?
I mean, don't we already have department head meetings and don't we work collaboratively? I mean, I don't know if this has been an issue before or where this is stemming from.
I know I have bid a lot of projects, and in the past, previous administrations, I have been told by department heads, I don't know why I'm designing this concrete project. I'm a so-and-so, and I'm not gonna name names or whatever, but the engineering should at least look at it, and if they see a red flag, then spend some time, spend a little time and get it tweaked.
Yeah, I can elaborate on that, Councilwoman DeWitt. I think this is one of the first things that I've seen, or since we've been reviewing the Chapter 57 in reference to public purchases. I think engineering does a good job. I do think that if department heads are, I agree with Councilman Webb that department heads, if they've got questions, they should reach out to engineering. I would agree with that 100%. Depending on what the project is if it's, I'm not a contractor, so I can't elaborate too much, but depending on what the project is, if they need assistance, they should be reaching out and ensuring, because it goes back to your statement of, I don't know first thing about this. Well, we have the resources, so you definitely need to utilize them. But I do know historically in the past, they've kind of put together their specs and some have sent them out. I do know that. How often did Daryl work with you on, obviously, they helped engineer the last project put out for bid, correct, Chief?
Yes, so we had engineering. We actually worked with an outside engineering firm along with internal engineering for the site development for our training expansion area. And then we also I worked internally with our engineering department on a building design for our outbuilding. So we kind of wrote up a set of specifications, gave it to the engineering department. They reviewed it, added some other language. So yes, to set that out for quotes, I wanted to make sure that everybody was quoting the same thing. So that's why we set those specifications, kind of like we do with a fire truck. When we go to purchase one of those, we write up a set of specifications so everybody's bidding the same thing. So I've working with the engineering department internally has been real easy for me. So it worked out well.
Yeah. And I guess my main point on having Chief speak on that was if they need help, they need to obviously ensure they're asking for the assistance, and engineering would be glad to help them. Would like a small project need them? Maybe not. I don't know. It depends on the project, right? We don't know until we know what we're dealing with. But historically, I think if department heads needed assistance, they'll go ask. There could be some that may have not. I was not aware of that.
So I think I guess to go back to your original question, Dave, yes, we would have to incorporate this. Likely, we'd have to vote down the filed ordinance and then refile a new one, because there's potentially too much that's been changed already to necessarily do this as an amendment tonight. We if we didn't do all the civil side of it, we might be able to get through it, but it could be messy. But as I'm going through this and listening to it, I'm not, whether the council or the committee or whoever decides to move forward with Councilman Webb's suggestions, I don't know where else they would fit, but I don't know if the public purchasing ordinance is necessarily the right place for that. It could be. I also don't know where else it would go. I think the other concern I have is, how do you define a civil project? Because, electric department they have a project where they are replacing transformers. You know, that could fit into that same category. And that would be part of my concern, is how do we effectively and accurately carve out those things that, assuming we all agreed, how do we effectively carve out those things that we would all say shouldn't be included in this and don't need engineering to be involved in it, as opposed to the other things? I'm not sure how, and while we're sitting here, I've tried to pull up a couple other cities just to see how they do it, if they do it, and I'm not finding anything like that anywhere where it's splitting out those different types of projects or purchases, other than how Indiana code does it based on the dollar amount of the project. So I'm not saying we couldn't figure something out, but I would, the concern I would have is, how do we effectively define that? And if we can't effectively define that, then I think it could cause problems down the road with anything under X amount of dollars. We're now having to send that through engineering to follow the code correctly. So again, I'm not saying it can't be done, but sitting here, I'm not sure how we necessarily do that.
I guess my thinking is,
If we've got department heads that are qualified to run their departments, for the mayor, if they need the help, they can go to engineering. We don't have to push everything to engineering just because it's $8,000 or $10,000 or $12,000. If it's something that, okay, Doug's doing something out at the fire station and he's got some concerns about it, we should rely on him to go to engineering and say, hey, take a look at this before I bid it out. But if it's something Randy up at the water pollution or up at the electric department or the water department knows he needs this generator, does it have to go through the engineering? I mean, he knows he needs this generator. He knows same way with electric. If they know they need a transformer, do we wait 2 weeks to get the approval to buy a transformer? I mean, I guess that's my thinking is we've got people that run the departments that, you know, the mayor feels well enough to have them in that department head that we need to give them a little bit of credit on that. And if it's something they have problems with or want to be sure of, then they can run it through the engineering department.
And they are very collaborative, and they do that anyway. I mean, that's my thought. Sure.
We're writing this for, you know, and we got good people right now, but we're writing this for, you know, in 8 years, 10 years down the road, somebody has guidelines and you never know what you're going to come up with. Definitely, I think you can come up with language that defines a civil project. Usually it's anything drawn on a napkin or a piece of paper is a civil project. But if you go buy a transformer, that's a product that's got specs and is built, manufactured. You know, you got this 3 or 4 different companies that make transformers. So that would be just purchasing of like equipment. So that would not fall under civil. And, you know, if you got to make sure the water flows downhill or the poop flows downhill or whatever, or the subbase or bad subbases. I like Zach's idea. Let's give it a little more time. Maybe we can refine the wording or something, come up with that everybody kind of likes to get the separation of the civil project. And like I say, I've been at this 45 years and it's a wild, wild west out there. So we could be breaking up some new ground and trying to establish a reasonable process for bidding civil projects with municipalities. You can avoid collusion and a lot of other situations if you have good procedures to follow.
Well, I guess then the first thing we need to define is what's a civil project.
Yeah. And I doubt if we're going to do that tonight.
Yeah.
All right. question for the committee. What are we going to do with this then?
Well, let me ask.
Let me ask the legal department, what's your opinion, Zach?
I'm not allowed to have an opinion. Okay. What are we doing with it tonight?
What do you think, where do you think we need to go? Either vote it tonight or let it tabled until,
Well, I think it would be helpful while we're having an ordinance and resolution committee meeting, figure out, is that the will of the committee and the other council members here to go down the path that Councilman Webb is suggesting? If everyone says yes, then we can look into that. If everyone says we think it's okay, that aspect of it we think is okay and we don't want to, then I don't know that it makes sense for me to draft it up that way if no one else is wanting that. If everyone else wants it, then we can see how we can figure that out, put that together. But I mean, I think that's kind of, to me, that makes the most sense while we're sitting here. Does everyone want to go down that path, or are we looking more at what is currently drafted and let that issue take care of itself? So that's what I would suggest.
Let's start with committee members. Any thoughts from committee members?
I'm torn, to be honest with you. I can see where it makes sense, but at the same time, how much do you get hung up on definition? I mean, one of my other questions about this ordinance is about a definition. So, how much can we define that or versus trust? I guess I'll just throw it out as an example. I mean, I'm questioning the definition of the word supplies, for crying out loud. If the fire department needs a new lawnmower, and it's $6,000 or $7,000, can they just go out and buy one because it's a supply, or do they have to bid it because it's not a supply? So I don't know. So that for me, the definition of civil contract is going to be the defining moment.
well, I think we could get stuck in the mud, so to speak,
Right.
of the definitions. What you think's a supply, I
Right.
might not think, but somebody else does. So I
Yeah.
guess,
And is the same thing going to apply to a civil project?
yeah,
You know,
what's a
at
civil
what
project?
point-
Yeah.
How do we define that?
Are we going to get in the weeds too far to where it's going to be nothing but a nightmare?
Right.
Okay, I personally like the changes, getting us going in a direction of the lower dollar amounts. We don't have to go out and do bids, and you can go buy an extension cord. You can go buy whatever you need to. Also, the time frame of the bidding process and setting the deadlines for the quotes and all that is a good thing. So I think every change that's in here is positive, and I would want to see in a final ordinance as it would be presented. The hang up again, and I had the same question with Zach earlier. I texted him earlier about the word supplies, and I tried to look up definitions, and there's no good definition for supplies. Supplies for one could be something else for somebody else. So the same thing with civil projects. I can see that being an issue, but I can also see dollar amounts between $10,000 and $50,000 that don't need to go to engineering. And then how do you differentiate that? I kind of waited. That's where I stand right now. Anything from any other council member that's not on the committee? I guess Natalie's.
I think this is a great start to show transparency for our process. I trust our department heads and our mayor to do what is right. And if there's an issue, I think going forward, they're going to be able to come to us and say, we need to revisit this. We need to look at it a little bit more. Definitions for civil, just Googling it, it's any public project work, anything. So we can interpret that however we want, right? So if we want to go down the definitions, I think it's going to be a little tricky and it's going to take some more time, which I'm okay with. I think where we stand today, I feel really comfortable with the ordinance as it is. I think our department heads and our mayor, like I said, do a great job. And if there's an issue going forward, they'll come to us and let us know.
I kind of agree with Natalie. We've got some start now with this new one. Let's put that in effect, and as we need to tweak it as we go along, we can do that accordingly, instead of just letting it lay where we've got nothing.
I'm comfortable with that moving forward. Let's move forward with what we have and come back if we can't wrap our heads around it later. I guess the only question I'll have that'll just push me one way or the other is, do we have a reason why we need to specifically move this forward? Are there situations that we need to address with this immediately, or if we table it another month, do we jeopardize something?
I think if you look where we currently are and where we're going, it's much, much better and much, much more transparent. And I think it allows the department heads to know kind of where they're supposed to be.
And I guess my concern is, if we don't do anything, what happens in the next month or two? Is people sitting there going, well, what do we do? You know, and I hate to see the engineering department bombarded or the mayor's office bombarded of, we need, like you said, the fire department needs a new mower. What do we do? So I guess this is a start. We start with this one, and then as we go along, tweak it. If we see something that, hey, we should have this in there, or we should need this changed, or whatever the case may be, would be my thinking.
Yeah, I'm okay with moving forward with what we have. I'm used to government, and it can take a lot of time and suggestions and, you know, minor tweaking over time to get to the point where I want to be. So I'm not going to vote against this if it goes forward the way it is, because there is a lot of good stuff in here that is on the timelines and all that stuff. So, but I will be wanting more discussion in the future if we pass this the way it is. That's just the way I roll.
Okay, so from the committee then, I guess I would need a motion from a member to either forward this back to the council with the proposed changes that the city attorney has come up with, or one to, I guess, let it die or leave it here and leave it tabled. So
I move we go ahead and present it back to the council with the changes that the city attorney has made on it.
Can we vote on that tonight? Because we're the only ones that have seen those changes, and we.
No. It won't come back to tonight's meeting. It would be at the following meeting. It can't be at tonight's meeting because it's not the 7-day deal.
Well,
I guess that was my question.
I think that's, if we needed to pass it on the first reading tonight, we could, but someone would have to. So it's been moved and seconded, then tabled, sent to committee, but it can be brought back, and someone could move to pass it with the following amendments. But that's up to you guys if you want to do that, or you can vote it down tonight, and I can resubmit a new clean copy. And this one, this didn't have a public hearing, so don't be mad. But we can do it either way. There's nothing wrong with amending it. You just basically have to read all of the, and I don't know how complicated
That would be.
Yeah.
It might be easier to just bring it back and then vote it down.
I'll refile it.
But honestly, we still need a second.
I will second.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask that question, but I will second Councilman Bundy's motion.
Okay. Now that you know it's going to get voted down. All right. So we have an emotion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. So this will be back on the agenda for tonight. Is there anything else that anybody sees that we need to discuss in terms of ordinances? All right, seeing none, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. I don't think I need a motion in a second. I'll just adjourn it. So thank you all for coming and participating.